All right, so I'm here with Dr. Enderle, right? Is that how you say it?
That's right.
Okay, so I initially thought it was Enderle. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, Enderle.
Yeah. What is it? What's the origin of the last name?
German. It's end early.
End early.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. So I heard about Dr. Enderle online, and because I'm a student here, and I was searching TED Talks that happened at UC Davis. And I came across his talks, and I know you're pretty passionate about the concept of God and science being, you said, in the same space.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you, like, what led you to that idea? Like, how did you come up with the fact that they could perhaps be in the same space, they share the same space?
Well, when I was younger, I never knew that there was a debate about it in the first place. So it was only later when I met other people who thought that they are not connected. And that's the first time I really started thinking about it.
I see.
Yeah.
So can you share what is basically your conclusion about that really fast? Or is it...
Sure.
Yeah, is that good? Okay.
Yeah, I think I don't think one can prove the other. So you can use God to prove or disprove science, or vice versa. Use science to prove or disprove God. They are both kind of different systems, say theology and science, and they have their own methods of study. But I think they operate in a parallel way, and sometimes maybe even stronger than that, such that they give us having both of them give us a more holistic view of our world. If you have one at the exclusion of other, I think you're missing a bit of something, either the process by which things happen, science, or potentially some of the deeper meaning, or I don't know, some of that depth or artistry or whatever you want to call it. Creativity, things that God can supply. Now, not to say that God can't supply logic or things like that, and not saying that science doesn't supply that.
Okay.
You know, they both overlap in their areas, but I think science is primarily an empirical method of study.
Exactly, yeah.
And theology is different. It's more like philosophy almost. Yeah.
See, I'm a philosophy major.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of times, like I've came across people who are also in the same field.
Sure.
Who they basically say that God is a void filler. I don't know if you've heard that term before.
Say more.
Like he fills the void of human beings, like parts of human beings that we can't describe.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So and also others they treat God as a fantasy, you know, especially in academia. And he just becomes this ritual thing versus a reality, you know?
Yeah. Or in philosophy, sometimes he's the flying spaghetti monster.
I've never heard of that.
Oh, really? I think just a generic term that's sometimes used about gods to give a philosopher the ability to kind of discount God in a generic way.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
So this is...
Yeah.
Philosophy sort of likes that, to discount arguments or discount worldviews.
That's true.
They're good at that.
Yeah, and that's true. And another thing is they say that you know, you really don't, you know, you don't need God to you know, live a good life.
For sure.
That's
I've definitely heard that.
I've heard that too. But you're saying that actually one complements the other.
Yeah.
And you're missing out if you don't connect it, like have them sort of sharing the same.
I think so.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so and one. Go ahead.
Like some of those definitions, I'm a little bit concerned about, or I would disagree. I mean, depending on your definition on God, then that leads you to your conclusions.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So, if I think the not needing God, from my mind, comes from the God in the gaps idea. I don't know if you've heard of this.
I haven't, no.
It means that, let's say a really simple example would be, in the past, a kid would ask their parent, why is the sky blue? And the parent would say, because God did that. Right?
Oh, okay.
And now...
you're saying like I'm sorry, they call that cop-out.
Yeah, almost a cop-out.
Yeah, you
like
just...
an easy answer.
Exactly. Yeah. Or like some people who deny global warming,
Sure.
You know, they say that it's God's plan or something.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things that you can say, and I can see how that highly troubles a skeptic, because a skeptic could say, well, now science describes why the sky is blue, why water is blue, all these sorts of things.
Right.
And so if that's all you need God for to describe the universe, then I can see how you get to the conclusion that there is no God.
I see.
Because as science starts to diminish those gaps, as we can explain things.
I see.
And so
it seems that it
feel
undermines.
like you don't need those cop-out answers anymore.
Yeah, it seems like it's being undermined. The notion of the cop-out version of God.
Right, and so I can highly see where a skeptic would get to the point that they say, I don't need God.
Exactly.
That's right, because you don't need God to explain those. I would also add, though, that God, still both answers can be important. I don't know if on my TED Talks you heard my tea boiling example.
Yes, I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you ask, like, why is the tea boiling?
You have a scientific...
You can give a scientific answer to the vaporization of the water.
Exactly.
You know, why do I want some tea, or why is the water boiling? But another answer that I kind of alluded to is the water could be boiling or being prepared because I want tea later.
Yeah.
And so you can you can answer the question why water is boiling in multiple ways.
I see.
And I think they both are significant.
I see.
The reason that I want tea is kind of like the God equivalent, analogous answer, and the scientific answer, parallel science.
Right.
So I think saying that God has his hand in something, God is doing something, shouldn't be trying to dismiss science.
I see.
And shouldn't be saying that there's no science. But I think that's kind of implied either by the people who used to do it or in the mind of the skeptic when they hear those sorts of things. And so they come up with the God in the gaps.
Right.
Which is described in this whole idea.
Yeah.
So I try to be careful of that.
I see. Cool. And one other thing I wanted to bring up really fast is...
Oh yeah, or slowly. That's fine.
Or slowly, okay. This notion that there is like we understand God through the effects that we sort of perceive in the world.
Okay.
You know, so like we have all the names of God, like omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresent.
Right. All these characteristics of his nature.
That you also talk about.
Yeah, sure.
And other names that he has a lot of names.
Oh, for sure.
Love, kind, generous.
God is love.
Giving.
God is light.
All of these names, right?
Okay, sure.
And I personally think if you say God is love, you're actually limiting that what he actually is. Those are just his effects that he produces.
Sure.
Just like how the sun's rays are the effects that the sun produces.
Right.
The rays aren't the sun,
Right.
So, like, I think even in science, there's a lot of like stuff that chemists or physicists are doing that they don't actually know, even at the sort of quantum theory scale, how things do the things that they do, right? Like you talked about entanglement, like how the two particles interact even when they're distant.
Right, yeah.
So like we don't, I guess in science we don't know the reason behind why, but we know that it happens. Yeah,
I think like for a simple example, something I was doing in class was talking about electron.
Okay, yeah.
Which is in an atom and has a lot of effects in chemistry. So we have all these studies. I was going over some of them in class of how we come up with the idea of an electron.
Right.
But the electron, like many things, entanglement, any idea, is a model that we make, or a theory, or whatever you want to call it, based on the evidence that we have.
Exactly.
And that model, like the model of electron, is really good. And we call it an electron, we have these descriptions of it. And this gets a little bit into philosophy, actually. When we say that we have a model of something, we don't necessarily mean that is really minutely how it is. that might not be complete reality.
I see.
It's just a model
It's limiting.
describing. It's somehow limiting, but extremely useful.
It's useful.
In one sense.
It works. It works.
It works, and we need that, and we can build on that.
Mm-hmm.
But an electron might not exactly be as we picture it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's hard, and it's hard to describe it.
It's just like how. So I feel like again, there's a parallel between even at that just the description of things that are very small.
Yeah.
But we know it by the way they produce effects that they produce.
Yeah.
And I think there's a parallel between that and God.
For sure.
Maybe we don't know, and I think you agree, right? Like just because we don't know what God is or how if He actually is real or not, that won't stop you to live a holistic life.
Sure.
It shouldn't stop you from enjoying poetry or
arts
or like you asked your student, have you ever loved before? Like don't stop you from being robotic. Having a robotic, mechanistic sort of attitude towards life.
Yeah, I think where the tension comes in is a skeptic might say, "Well, I can do that without the idea of God."
Right.
Which I can understand. And I think you could get to some, depending on how you're defining God,
exactly.
you can kind of get there. I would argue the opposite, and thus we have the tension of we have differing assumptions about how the world works. Right? And we live out our worldviews differently.
Exactly.
And it's hard for me to prove that God exists. It's hard for the skeptic to prove that God doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right? And so we have this tension.
Hence you use analogies.
I think that's the best we can do.
To shed light on possibilities,
The possibility that God is not as unusual or as weird as we might think.
Oh, we might think, yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot more sense. And a lot of my examples are from science, and I think science helps us make a lot of those ideas, especially the idea of modern science.
Yeah.
So many things that are really interesting analogies to the idea of God.
Yeah. And okay, so this is the final thing I want to mention. Okay. So I think Dr. Enderle, your idea of, or the conclusions that you have come up with, is very much aligned with the Baha'i principle of the harmony between science and religion.
Okay.
And I think the Baha'i faith is, I would say, the first religion that's like 100 and something years old. It's almost 200 years old.
Okay.
But that says that science and religion have to agree.
Oh, okay.
And I think previous religions, I guess humans weren't ready for it. Maybe they didn't mention or it didn't give sort of any information about that they could agree. Yeah. And so I'll read you a quick thing that Abdu'l-Baha, he's the teacher of the Baha'i faith.
Okay.
He said, any religious belief which is not conformable. Okay, again. Any religious belief which is not conformable with scientific proof and investigation is superstition.
Yeah.
For true science is reason and reality, and religion is essentially reality and pure reason. Therefore, the two must correspond. Religious teaching, which is at variance with science and reason, is human invention and imagination unworthy of acceptance. For the antithesis and opposite of knowledge is superstition, born of the ignorance of man. If we say religion is opposed to science, we lack knowledge of either true science or true religion, for both are founded upon the premises and conclusions of reason, and both must bear its test.
Interesting, yeah.
Is that clear, yeah?
Yeah, I think from what I've studied, after the Renaissance period, the Reformation, that was happening in Europe and kind of the surrounding areas, with reason that was coming in from philosophy and from science, this became a debate in theology and philosophy. Like, okay, is religion, like it says, compatible with science? Are they incompatible? And how do you put those pieces together?
Right.
And I think it was worded really nicely here. I think they're compatible. But they use different areas of study and methods of kind of looking at it. I would say that God is not necessarily empirical in the same way that science would use empirical data. But there's ways we can use methods of some sort of reasoning to kind of say that I think that they can be super aligned
Mm-hmm.
and give us this holistic view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, great quote.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It was
Cool.
great to meet you, Dr.
Yeah,
Enderle.
nice to chat.
So I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. If you have any questions or comments, please share down below. And hit that like button if you enjoyed. I'm sure he also has YouTube channel where I've seen you post lectures.
Yeah,
Probably it's not
mostly
relevant
chemistry,
here. It's
mostly
probably not
chemistry.
relevant here,
But yeah, you can find my
yeah.
2 TEDx talks.
Yes, I'm gonna include those. There's the I button up here. Yeah, it's right there. Yeah,
Okay.
just click that and you'll see the different videos that he's given. I really
Nice.
enjoyed your talks.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, they're very
it was
clear and very well thought out.